All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the Advisors Advantage with James Murphy. Boy, are we in for a treat, a sweet treat, depending on what you're ordering at Rook Coffee. Today, we are here with one of the owners, Holly Migliaccio, and we are going to get into her home buying experience right now. Holly, welcome to the show.
Sir, thank you for having me. I'm
Oh, it's a
super happy to
pleasure.
be here. It's been a long time.
Has been.
Yeah.
Has been. You've done a few things since our first transaction together, right?
It's been how many years? Well, I've,
Several years. I don't know
yeah.
exactly. I mean, we've had children that have
Yeah.
grown and they're
Yeah.
like going to high school now, and so it's been a while. I'm so excited to have you on the show because I think we talked a little bit earlier off camera about culture and what your brand brings to the table, and I think when people think of Rook Coffee, they think of good vibes, good vibes, Jersey Shore, great times. Tell us a little bit about where you're at with that and what you think your brand brings.
I it, now I like ask my children. I remind them like, what do you know what I do for a living? Yeah, like what I do. And they're like, Mom, you make people happy. And I'm like,
Oh, that's
nailed it.
awesome.
And
Yes.
that really is the premise of how we started. We wanted to come up with a business that ultimately sort of gave back to our community and made people happy. And it's like it's pretty simple. It's a cup of coffee,
Right.
But you could screw up a cup of coffee. You could screw up the experience of getting a cup of
Hmm.
coffee. And our goal was to nail it every time, as much as we could. So what I do is I make people happy.
You should have.
That's all.
I went to breakfast this morning. I had a meeting, and where we went, they screwed up the cup of coffee.
Mm.
It was here. It was a black cup of coffee, but just the bitterness. Like it was. I think I finished one cup. She's like, "Can I offer you?" No, I'm good. Thank you very much. Watching my caffeine intake.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, here we are.
One
But
more.
one or two more. I'll have like several of these. But yeah, so you absolutely can mess that up.
You can mess it
What
up.
goes into your coffee? When
I
we've
mean,
spoken in the past, you've gone all over the world.
I've been all over the world, from Costa Rica, Guatemala, Colombia, Sumatra, Tanzania. Like we've gone a
Right.
lot of different places. Um, and building relationships. We're going to these countries to learn and see the farms where the coffee is coming from, and make sure that year after year, that if we stick with that, farm or that
Mhm.
co-op, they're called, that it's going to be consistent. And so we go back a lot. I don't go as often anymore, and I have a team, and it's nice for them to get to go. So we've
Yes,
been able to send our team members over the years
that's
to all
awesome.
these finding great coffees where it starts, and then how you treat it. Right, then we bring the coffee in and we roast it fresh. We do all single origin coffees, which just means we don't do a lot of blending. We don't do really any blending. Once in a while, holiday time, we'll do a blend, but really, it's just these single origin coffees that are really, really, really good. So our goal, unlike your experience at breakfast, not that they weren't trying, but their thing is probably food, breakfast. Oh, and
Sure.
here's a cup of coffee. Our thing is
Right.
coffee.
Right.
We'll have people who are like, I'll take I don't know, an Earl Grey. And I'm like, well, we don't have tea. And they're like, what kind of coffee shop doesn't have tea? And we're like,
Yes.
well, coffee shop doesn't
Right.
have tea and coffee,
Right.
but like we'll have like the iced teas and things that are we can nail. But I'm not an expert in tea, so
Right.
we don't have like this whole plethora of things. But we're focused on coffee. That's our thing, and cold
And,
brew.
and that's I think a great point. That focus. I remember. I think one of the conversations we had in the past was like, you can't come to my coffee shop and get an espresso. You're not gonna go get
Yeah,
a cappuccino and all
yeah.
of those stuff. You're here for coffee.
Well, we kind of put down this like, here's what we're doing. We're doing things that are simple. We're doing things that create an experience, and it's got to be high quality.
Hmm.
So quality, simplicity, experience. Those three things we talk about. And I just explained the quality: going to the country, getting good coffee, roasting it ourselves, keeping it fresh, and then grinding and brewing it to order, or even the cold brew. It just comes out. We make a cup on the spot. Um, and then the experience just has to be over the top. It just does. And of course, I mentioned simplicity. We don't have espresso. We don't have all these tea offerings. We don't have a lot of food. It's just we are really good at coffee. That's our thing. We stay focused on it, and it's worked. So
Well, I think that simplicity has allowed you to just explode the brand, right? Because it keeps, like you said, your focus, and people know what they're getting. Doesn't matter if they're in Homedale or Ocean or wherever. They know if they go into Rook, they're leaving with a smile and a great cup of coffee.
And that's exactly it. Like, I love a chai tea, and I will go to Starbucks once in a while. I'm like, what? But like, I don't have chai.
Blasphemy.
I don't have chai tea, so I can't get. So. But what we do is we stay focused on our thing, and that is coffee. And like you said, it has given us the ability to scale and keep things as consistent as possible. So if you go to one location, you're getting something, and you go to the other, you're getting the exact same thing.
How not many people realize how the roasting process
Mm.
works, right? Like I talked to somebody. I remember the first time I found out that coffee beans were originally green.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
green? How does it? How
They're
does
actually,
go from
it
there?
starts, it's like a bush, and the bush has cherries on it. They look like cherries.
Cherries, right.
Mostly red. You'll find yellow and orange, but so picture a bush with red cherries on it, and then inside that cherry, I use my hand because at the farm you put it in your hand and you're like open it and you're like, there's the beans,
Right.
and it has two, coffee beans that are like this, and you open it and it has like mucilage around it. It's almost like a fruit. It's sweet. You can like suck on it, but you can't bite the bean. It's like hard, almost like a peanut, but like really hard. And then but that needs to dry, and then after it's dried and processed, they take all the mucilage off. I could go on. I could nerd out on coffee all day. But by the time it gets to us, it's in the big burlap bags, and it's kind of a greenish, brownish color, but not brown like until it's roasted, actually brown. So it's green, and then we cook it, and it becomes cooked brown.
And then you grind it up.
Grind
Pour the
it
water
and
through it.
brew. Yeah, with the
makes
hot
it-
coffee, as you know, you grind the coffee, you pour hot water over it, and it makes a cup of hot coffee. With the cold brew, it's very different than iced coffee. Iced coffee is hot brewed coffee, cooled down in a fridge, and then throw ice over it. Cold brew brews overnight. So you take the grinds, you grind all the beans, you put them in essentially a vat. We have almost like brewing tanks, like
Okay.
you'd picture in a brewery, and room temperature water with the grinds for 18 plus hours, and it just sits. So it's brewing not with heat, and that allows it to so it really drops in acidity level. So when you have a cold brew, it's very low in acidity compared to a hot cup or even a typical iced coffee. So it's easier on the stomach. People don't know that. I can nerd out all day on coffee. I could.
Well, and I'm sure that most of our listeners would rather hear about that than anything else, just because you're on the show. We are the advisor's advantage, right? So we focus on first-time homebuyers, right? So
Yeah.
it's about giving them an advantage in this crazy market because you've bought houses recently, right? And the supply, the demand, the interest rate market. I mean, it's insane out there, right? I remember just last couple of years, the highest I think I've had as an overbid was I think 200 and change.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine going out to buy a house and saying, "What's the asking price?" I'll go $200,000 higher. Crazy. But if you don't, in a sense, you don't have a chance of getting that house. So what we try to do on the show is speak with amazing people, professionals, past clients, and try to talk about what they did, what works for them, what are other agents doing. So first and foremost, we've closed on a transaction together a few years ago. Let's talk about that experience because that was your first primary residence.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So tell us how that went.
I was, I was mentioning to you, like I was green, right,
Yeah.
in the whole
You're like those beans.
process. It was like the beans.
You
I was
gotta go
like,
through the bean
oh,
process.
and somebody cooked me up. I don't know what to do here. I had. We'll reel it back real quick. I had an investment property that I had purchased in my 20s. I worked for Yahoo, and I had gotten a bonus. I won a big sales contest, and I don't know if you remember this story. So I won a big sales contest, and they were giving away Jeep Wranglers, 5 Jeep Wranglers across the company. We had offices all over the country, but the offices were all in like cities: Miami, LA, San Francisco, Denver, and of course New York City. And I'm living in New York City, and I win this big sales contest, and I was like, yeah, but I don't need a car,
Right.
And they were like, right. And there was a few of us that were like, what are we going to do with a car? We live in the city. And they were like, right. So we'll just pay you out instead. And we were like, sweet, So I had received this large bonus, the amount that a Jeep Wrangler cost at the time. And It was actually just when they came out with four-door Jeep Wranglers. It was like whatever that year was back in early 2000s, and my dad was advising me. He was like, "Hey, you should," had tried to do real estate in the past, and he was in business a little bit. And he, a friend of his he worked with was selling their home, and it was an investment property. And I was like, "All right, I'll do it." But I was like 27, and
Right.
I had no idea what I was doing. Which in retrospect was a good thing because I failed so hard on that property. And we can get into that if you
Yeah, I
want
wanna
to
hear about
later.
that.
But
Yeah.
I failed so hard on that property that now I have like this vendetta against real estate, with real estate, and now I own properties and I properly invest in properties, or at least I think I properly do it. But for my first home for myself and my family, we did the mortgage together, and I will say, as I was so green and so scared. And my wife Shannon was like, I understand it, and it was like the two of us. I was like, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" And she knew what she was doing, and she probably you
She
would
went
call
and got
me,
her
and I'd be like,
license.
"Call Shannon." Yeah,
Right. She went and got her license just to make sure she knew what she was doing
Yes,
so well.
correct. So she
Right?
got a real estate license, and we were just like, we're gonna learn so much that we're over prepared, and you helped us in that process, quite frankly. And it was such a big purchase, your first home.
Yeah, yeah.
It's scary as heck, and you have everybody telling you. It's almost like when you tell somebody what you're going to name your kid, and they're like, I don't know,
Yeah, right.
you shouldn't
Quinn?
do that.
I don't know
Well,
about
you're
that.
paying that much for a house or that
Right.
much for a car. You're like, I don't want your opinions.
Right.
You just want to work with people who know what they're talking about.
Right.
And we did it. I remember we took shots in the parking lot at the end. We had a
Yes.
beer, and then
Yeah.
you were like, "Where's that check?" And I had to run back. Like I didn't know that attorney at the time still had a check that he owed me. Remember
Right.
that?
Yes.
And
We
I was
sent
like,
you back in to
if
get
you
that
weren't
money.
here, there was thousands that was
Yes.
would have been lost.
Right. Would have been like, oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah,
you
just
had that.
certain things about that process that I learned, of course, for future, purchasing. But yeah, what an experience. And that house was awesome.
Yeah.
That was the best.
Yeah. So you've sold that property since?
So I've sold that property since.
Okay.
And snuck in and bought a house from, I say snuck in, during this market, right? It was during COVID, quite frankly. And same thing. It's like, what's for sale? What's not? Can you get it before it goes on the market? And it was a friend of ours, a friend of a friend, but became closer. And they wanted a good family in their home. And that happens a lot.
Oh yeah, it does.
And they probably could have gotten more, but we probably could have gotten more, and we gave it to somebody who we kind of knew, that feeling. It's buying a home is so emotional.
I was just gonna say that.
Selling a home is so emotional.
Well, just a home is emotion, right?
Yeah.
You're raising your kids there. You're building memories.
Yes. So it went from very green to our process, which we went into like hyper education mode, and with your help, of course, and we did it, and yeah, it was.
You mentioned something before, and I think this is a great advantage point. Is the letters, right? How many? I have borrowers and buyers that will literally we'll work on like an emotional letter together.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
You'll say like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I think it's great. And, you should. What about your kids? And you should add that, and what you're looking for, and how this fits it. And we talk about it. So, a letter to the seller can go a very long way.
Oh, heck yeah!
Right? It can help you get the house for less, because everything with purchasing, I always say purchasing is emotional. Right? There's always the logistical, like logical aspect of it. Right? Where I joke with my real estate professionals, and I'm like, you have the benefit of being on the emotional side, right? You get to talk about like, oh, your kids and look at this.
Yeah.
And you can do this in this room.
Paint the picture.
Paint the picture, right? Everything's amazing. You're selling the dream.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, by the way, now talk to James about the finances. And then it's like, wait, what? And then I gotta be like, I know.
Now they're stressed. They're
Right.
like, oh,
Exactly. They're
and
like,
I really want it.
right. We're gonna find a way. We always find a way. But I always have that part of the conversation, which again doesn't have to be so stressful. It just matters how you handle it. And if you're ahead of the problems, if you're being proactive and not reactive, then you can really have a smoother process than anything else.
For sure.
So you touched on your investment property. Tell me about that. Tell me what did you learn from that investment property?
Okay, so risk, right? Yeah. Risk. I went into that, and not not to like blame my dad, but he was like, "You have this money. This is a good investment." And I should have asked a lot more questions. Like, well, am I going to manage the tenant? Are you going to manage? We kind of co-managed the tenant because I lived in New York City at the time, and he lived down here, and this was in Highlands. Great little piece of property. I loved it. I still go by it. You could see Manhattan from the from the front windows. Um, but it was, you know, there was a leak, and I'm like, Dad, and there's stuff like that that I wasn't ready for. And in retrospect, it was risky. I didn't get the second lease to the tenant on time, and so then we were month to month, and I didn't know, and it was during a time when people were losing their jobs. It was in 2007 at
Yeah,
this
recession.
point.
Yeah.
And then I left my job because it was like beyond the scope of what I was sold on. And anyway, I ended up short selling that house.
Okay.
And it was before I opened Rook. I didn't have a job. It was like in the middle, and it was just, you're at the bottom. You're just like, I'm at the bottom. What just happened?
Right.
Um, and so I went from this bonus, this high. I was working for this great company, bought this investment property, to like, all right, well, now I got to start over. I got to start from scratch. My credit's crushed. Um, uh, and it wasn't the end of the world, and it created a good lesson for me. And so we rented for a number of years, and then we bought our house with you, and but I was like, okay, whenever something like that happens, right? And this could be for anything in life, even with my own business, I say to people, I'm like, you don't know how to do something until you know how to do something, right? And you have to experience that. I never owned 11 coffee shops and operated 11 coffee shops until I opened the 11th. Like,
Right.
I won't go through my, I guess this will be my 12th summer until I start next month. Like, that'll be 12. You don't know it and do it until it's done. So now I bought this house. I failed on one. I did very well on the second one. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready to, like, now let's invest in some properties,
Right.
So I went from this very, very low to this, all right, now I want to do it right. And it's time and patience and educating and knowledge and talking to the right professionals, which adds up to, whatever you come up with as your formula, again, for investing. But for first time home buyers, just educate the heck out of yourself. That's what I would do before, or during, but and talk to professionals. Don't listen to everybody around you, mom, dad. No offense, moms and dads out there, but like,
But it's not the same market, right? They're
it's
not buying. I get a conversation with my father. He's like, "Oh, I remember my first house was $80,000." I was like, "Yeah," or he says, "My first house interest rate was like 18%." Right? They all say 18%.
18.45% was the highest. Everybody,
Right.
Like, my aunt told me that, and I was like, she's like, yeah, we were at 18% our first, and I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, but I just got my house for under 3.
Right. Right.
Now that's not the case anymore, but 6-7% is probably pretty good.
Yeah.
Like,
In
no
comparison.
offense, like,
Right.
it is not the worst thing in the world. And then if things come back down, they come back down and you refi. But learn that, know that, understand that. It's not like you're losing all. Oh my God, I'm going to pay 7% for 30 years. That's not.
And that's such a great point. And as I told my dad, I was like, well, listen, 18% is fine, but houses aren't $60,000, $70,000 anymore, right? So, there's a difference there.
Yeah, right.
But you make a great point with the refi, and I talked about this a lot. We it's important to work with the right people to get into the house, right? Because this process, if you alluded to, isn't always the easiest, right? All kinds of things can happen. I always reference a minefield, right? And I always say, when you're going through this process, it's almost like you're walking through this minefield where any misstep can blow up the entire transaction,
Sure.
right? But if you're holding the hand of someone who's walked through that minefield for 2 decades, a solid professional, whether it's me or somebody else, we know where the mines are, right? It's a little less stressful, right? So we can get you through that process. And I feel like, there's so much that you learn just from your first transaction that you no idea.
For sure.
The education part, the point that you made, that's so clutch. That's so key. And that's really what we try to focus on. we're always going to try and get the best rate out there, and everybody wants the best rate, but you need to be educated. You need to be comfortable and confident. And then when you are, you know, that's what makes for a smooth process.
Well, you can't get comfortable and confident unless you're educated.
Right. Well,
Like
that's it.
knowledge, you just get yourself the best base of knowledge that you can get in the process, and then you should feel confident going into it. You should feel confident with those conversations.
Right.
I wasn't with my original one. I wasn't with the one with you until like I got in and like
So we start
while we were
talking,
doing
like,
it,
yeah.
I was like, all right, I this is now I got to do this right, you know.
Right.
But you make a good point that actually like it almost mirrors a business or starting a business as an entrepreneur, right? You go all in, you take this big risk. You're like, okay, with a business, the risk is all up front. You're like, all right, here, I'm going to invest. And then hopefully on the back end, I make money, and like with Rook, it was just like, here's all our saving. Here's what's left, right?
Mhm.
I had just short sold a house. I had used up like this is the rest of my savings. Here it is. Um, and so it was like all this risk. So same with buying a house. You're like, okay, closing costs and 7%. And oh my gosh, here's everything. Parents loaned some money or from the wedding, right?
Yeah.
Here's everything. But like in the back of your head, you have to know that 30 years or however long you own a home, or even, as things change, we just talked about, you could refi. I mean, you're the professional, but like in my head, I'm like, well, as I talk to, friends that are buying and our employees are starting to buy homes and start families that have been with us for years. But there's the refi. And then of course there's appreciation. Like you still are going to have this thing at the end, right? Like, and especially in this area, like
Yeah.
I don't ever claim to know everything. So like, caveat here, like I don't know everything, but my personal belief, is that this area is not going back down.
No.
And if
no
they do,
way.
it might be a blip, but they're,
Right.
so if you're willing to stay with that first property for 5+ years, 10 would be even greater, it will appreciate. So you have like the possibility of refi, a good possibility, in my opinion. And then you have the appreciation. So yeah, you're putting all your chips in up front, but that's like a business. With Rook, I put all my chips in because I believed in, my ability to, get something on the back end. You got to believe that you're going to get, I think appreciation, at least
Yeah.
appreciation on the back end.
Yeah, I think appreciation numbers go up and down every year, right? And like any financial cycle, everything is cyclical. I think you go back 2 years ago, 2020, 2021, you're talking 20% year over year. I mean, I remember closing transactions in January, putting 10% down or 5% down. I even told them, they were like, oh, I got 20% down. Don't do that. Like, just your credit's great. You're going to have mortgage insurance of like $80 to $60 a month. You're going to save 10% of this money, which was like tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And I said, just live in it for 10 months and you're going to refinance out of the mortgage insurance. And sure enough, by October, November, they're refinancing. They have no mortgage insurance. They've gained 10, 15% equity in the home. And it cost them $500, $600. And it's
But
like,
what you just said for first time home buyers, they're like, what'd you just say? What does that mean?
Right.
Like, can you put links in the bottom of the podcast for each definition of what you just said? Right.
Yeah.
Because I now know what you're talking about, but I didn't understand all those things when you were saying. And I was like, yeah, but just
the cheapest payment right now.
Yeah.
I just need the cheapest payment right now.
Right. Because
Yeah.
you're scared and fear takes over quite a bit in our, culture, and society.
Well, it does. And I think education eliminates fear. So my daughter just won this big track meet on Wednesday. Actually, last night we were at the awards dinner, or Monday, excuse me. And she's running this heat that she's never run before. And I think it was the 800 or maybe it was the 400 for her. She usually does distance and not. So anyway, so she's running this. She's nervous because she's like, I just don't do that. I said, listen, Grace, you're feeling this fear, right? And there's two things that trigger fear. And one is lack of preparation. I said, you've been running since you were in third grade. Okay, you're going in ninth grade right now. You are well prepared, right? And then the other one is, unknown. I said, don't worry about the unknown, right? You're just gonna do it. You're well qualified. You're well prepared. You're gonna be great. So So you just go out there and you focus on running and one step at a time, one runner at a time, right? And sure enough, she's going around the track. She's in second or third, and all of a sudden she does her thing. And
Yeah.
she likes to chase them off, So my daughter will let people go a little bit ahead of them, just so she can feel that adrenaline rush of just picking them off, and she loves it. So sure enough, that's what she did, and took just a commanding lead over these people. When she finished, she looked at me, and
She's like,
I had a tear coming down, and she had it. She was just like, we pointed at each other, and it was just an awesome moment. And then her younger sister, same exact situation. Yet she was a little less nervous. She's like, it's just a run, Daddy. And that's what we talk about. It's like, it's just a run. You just go out and run. You know what you do. Just go do it. Right? So sure enough, she did the same thing, except she had to do so they flipped. So Grace did the 400. She did the 800. Never have they done it before. It's 2 laps and they. So sure enough, she did the same exact thing. And it was like such an amazing.
Sister.
Yeah. People came up to us. They were like, these Murphy girls are amazing. I was like, wait till you see my boy. And sure enough, he came up and he crushed it as well. So the awards dinner last night was exciting because they left there looking like Mr. T with all like the medals and the chains and stuff.
So cute.
It was such a great moment. But I think, this is applicable to anything, whether you're starting a new business, you're buying a home, just trust the process, educate yourself the best that you can, and just keep moving, right? And I think what you don't know, that was a great thing that you said, right? What you don't know, right? Until you find it out, right? And then sometimes you just kind of have to work with the right people, trust them, and learn along the way. Yeah. And then next thing you know, you become a real estate mogul.
I don't know about that, but once you understand it, right? Yeah. Shannon, my wife, has her, real estate license. We have properties that we manage. We have some with property management, short term, long term. Like now we're like into it. It's like a hobby. It's like, oh, I know how to, and you're still taking risks, of course. But when you're more educated and knowledgeable, the risks don't feel as heavy because you're like, well, this is an educated risk.
Right. Right. And I've prepared for this. I've gone through something like this, and, we live, we learn, right? I always tell my kids that, life is a lesson. If you're not learning, learn something. Yeah. Find a way to figure it out. If you're not learning, you're not paying attention.
Well, I'm all for failing too. Because, that failed property, the very first one, looking back, I'm like, if I didn't fail at that property, well, first of all, if that tenant didn't move out, like she left because it was month to month, there was a leak. I didn't call her back fast enough. She's like, I'm out of here. And I was like, it's February and I just signed a lease in Brooklyn and I lost like $2,500 overnight because of, the deposit on the Brooklyn place. And I had to move into the Atlantic Highlands and start commuting and that commute crushed me so bad that I was like, I'm out. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going there anymore. And then I created Rook, so there's this, this thing that happened to me with that property. I could look at it as a failure. I could look at it as a stepping stone to, changing my life.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I love most about your story, right? And I think of like Michael Jordan, where he says he's never lost a game. He's always, if he lost, he learned, right? So he never failed, right? And he always looked at it that way. But you're someone like yourself with just a similar mindset. You created, I'm going to call it an empire because I think it's becoming an empire. But a Jersey Shore empire, you created this from the dust, from your lowest point, right? You lost the house. You lost your job. I mean, your credit was shot, like you said. I mean, you just were at the bottom. And how did you find the strength to build up something like this?
I remember like there's this, and I've talked about this before, like being in bed one night and just like shaking, being like, what are you doing? Why did you quit your job? What are you doing? What, a coffee shop? What are you doing? Because you doubt yourself. Yeah. And I think you're lying if you say you don't doubt yourself. You're lying if you say you don't have insecurities. We all have insecurities. So there was that, oh my God, what'd you do? And then, you have your parents who are like, what are you doing? You had a 6-figure job and you just quit. You have a mortgage. You have a car. What are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to do something, And then we traveled for a little bit. I was like, let's just, Shannon and I went to Southeast Asia for 3 months after I quit,
Wow.
and like backpacks, and just were like, let's and my brother and sister-in-law, now they were dating at the time, rented our house, and they instead of rent, they redid our kitchen, which in retrospect I lost the house, whatever.
Maybe
It's
not
fine.
the best one.
But they lived in the house while we traveled for 3 months, and it was like this like soul searching. What are we gonna do? She had just been in a layoff. Citibank had a layoff, and so it was this soul searching time, and it was from the dust. It was like, here's all the chips, everything left. And Sean, we came back from that trip, and Sean, my business partner, childhood friend, proposed a coffee business. And we're like, sorry,
Right.
screw it, let's just do this,
Right.
no, but it was this period of like, yeah, like, let's just go and do this. I know that I'm capable. As insecure as you may be, we are so much more capable than we give ourselves credit for. We just are, and I'm a firm believer of that. Like, I am no different than anybody. And I say that I'm going to go talk to students after this, right? Out, to school, 100 kids, third, fourth, and fifth graders, and that's part of my speech. It's like, I am no different than anyone in the room ever. It's just, I work really hard, I take some risks, and I believe in myself. And we all have the insecurities,
Right.
but just keep going.
You got to push through it.
Promise, there's some gold on the other side. There is.
Well, I think in that belief or faith, if you will, is what drives the people to go through the adversities, right? Because too many, I've got buyers that I talk to. We just closed a transaction for someone that I started working with in 2020, and what happened with her is she said she's been on the show, and she said it like, I wish I would have moved then, because the amount of money she would have made just in that appreciation alone, 2 years at 20 plus. Now we're still hovering around 4 to 6, maybe 8 in some areas, percent appreciation. But she talks about it, like, had I bought then, what I could be doing right now, right? And it's that fear that stopped her. It was like, oh my God, COVID, the world's collapsing, I can't do this, right? But not taking that risk, hundreds, thousands of dollars.
We did it all during COVID, and I think we made 40% on that house. Like,
yeah, I'm
we
sure
paid high, they paid high. Like,
Right.
in retrospect, at that moment, but that's just what was happening. It's crazy.
And I think that's what we want our audience, our first time home buyers, to understand, that, listen, life is not always easy, right? And there's challenges that come our way, but what makes or breaks us is how we handle those challenges, right? And just having the right people on your team. I always say it's about the team, right? And I never refer to myself as your guy, as like, oh, me and my team. My team is going to do this for you, and because I know that I'm nothing without a solid back office, right? I could be the best sales guy, the most knowledgeable mortgage professional out there, but if I don't have the best loan assistant, or loan partner, I call her, the best opener, the best processor, the best underwriter, that we can work together, and I do, that, I wouldn't be closing transactions in a week to 2 weeks, right? I wouldn't be receiving the testimonials that I get from clients that are just like, this was so much easier than I thought it was.
And what did you learn, like, in your years? I mean, we worked together. It was probably almost 10 years ago, 8 years, something like
Somewhere
that.
around there, yeah.
7, 8 years. Like, from the beginning of your start of your career, I should say, to where you are now with this team, did you know, like, man, if I had a better partner then, or if I had this team then, what could I have been doing then that now,
Yeah, that's a great question, and I I love the back and forth. What I'll tell you, one thing I've always realized is that I can't do it all, but I've always been someone that's always said, I can handle this, or I can do this. I joke, like, my plate is like Thanksgiving dinner, right?
Yeah.
I put so much stuff on there,
God.
right? I'm probably not gonna eat anything but the the sweet delicious stuff,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
still put the all the other stuff on there. But I realized that I can't do this all myself, right? And I can provide such a better experience for my buyers, and my professionals that I work with, my partners out there, my real estate partners, my referral partners, like my accountants and financial advisors that trust me enough to send their clientele my way. I can do so much more for them, and it's such a better job if I can, have other
Right.
people spread it out, right, and pick the right people on my team that are going to do and think the way I think,
Sure.
right, and also I think one of the biggest concerns or fears is with buyers is communication, right, or one of the biggest issues they have I talked about is, I didn't know what was going to happen next, or I didn't know what to do, or I didn't know I needed that, right. So when you have like, we're giving constant email blasts. We just developed an app, the Advisor's Lighthouse,
Nice.
2.0 plug. Um, and the app allows you as a buyer to go right on your phone. Where am I? All right, I can't reach James because he's in an appointment. He's doing a podcast. He's all over wherever. So let me just see where I'm at. Oh, okay, I'm in underwriting. Oh, appraisal was ordered, right?
Yeah.
And it gives them that comfortable communication feel, right? Where they're like, I don't need to worry, because I think that's where worry comes from: the unknown, the
Yeah.
stress, right? The concern, and then we start. Human nature is we start imagining.
We build stories.
We build stories in our head. And
Of
it's like,
course.
oh my God, he's not calling me back because I'm denied.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that statement I just gave. There's a problem with that. Like, no, I'm just in a podcast with Holly. That's all I'm doing.
No stories. Just
Right.
just
Relax.
relax. Yeah.
Check your app.
You're right. Communication is everything, and I could go in all directions with this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Even talk about AI. Like, if you can communicate properly with people that you're trying to get a project done together, like, get the mortgage, get the house. If you guys are communicating properly as human beings, as much as possible, it's going to be so much smoother. Even with my team, you realize, like, you have to get communication. If they have a question, out fast. If you wait a day, stories build, and
Yes.
it's in everything in life.
Mhm.
So yeah, human communication is
Right.
ideal.
I have a thing here where I tell my team, I said, I don't want to deliver any bad news unless you have the good news right behind it, right? We're not going to discuss the problem until we have a solution, right?
Love
Because
that.
once they start hearing that problem, like if I called you and I said, hey, Holly, really quick, we got a problem. I'm going to try and figure this out. I just want you to know that we got this issue going on. I'll call you later. And then I get tied up, or something else. What are you doing? You're like, oh my God, he's not calling me. It's not going to happen. Things are wrong. So, one of the ways we've maintained that high level communication and that comfort level is, hey, Holly, we got a problem with this. Here's how we're going to fix it. Right. And then I find that the client is so much more at ease, because, and they've told me, they're like, James, you made that so much easier than I thought it was going to be.
You disarmed fear, like,
That's a big
before it even developed.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And they don't know that. They're not digesting, like, I was about to be so afraid if he didn't just say that. But you're
Right.
like, let me just say this,
Right.
so that they never even get to the point of afraid.
Right. And my clients, they have my cell phone, to my wife's dismay, this thing's always on me, and I tell them that as well. I was like, so don't worry. There's no silly questions. There's no stupid questions. Everybody's worried, like, oh, I was going to ask you this, but I felt like, stupid. I felt like it was going to be a, bad question. I'm like, what are you, crazy? Have you done this before?
Yeah.
And
How
I'll
would you
often say,
know?
like, what do you do for a living? Right. And then they'll tell me, oh, I'm an engineer. But I was like, okay, well, I don't know the first thing about engineering. I don't know. Or what, you're a cook. All right. Well, how do you make a good meal? Right. I don't know. I mean, I think I make decent meals, but you're going to tell me more.
You're
than
the professional.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I find that you just communication, talk to me, reach out to me. And we try to alleviate those stressful situations.
It's important.
Yeah. So we're at the point in the show, which is literally my favorite part of the show. And I call this a parting piece of pie. Right? And pie is an acronym for something profound. P stands for profound. Tell us something that's going to blow our mind. You have the choice of this. Inspiring is the I. You can tell us something inspirational, something that's going to raise emotions and really give us something to leave with. Or you could just be your funny self and tell us something entertaining.
Not as funny as you think. I mean, I don't think.
You can say one of all three. You just went with this Gary V thing, right?
That was cool.
Yeah.
It was cool. VCon.
VCon?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a quick on that. VCon, you got to look it up because I can't even describe. But it was a business marketing leadership pop culture type conference. It was Neil Patrick Harris and Drew Barrymore and
Oh wow.
Busta Rhymes and Andrew Schultz, the comedian. Like there were some cool Damon John. Like there were some cool people there. But it wasn't too packed, so it was kind of like I'm like sitting up front for Scooter Braun, and I'm like Bobby Brown and her son. Like I'm like right, like where is everybody? And
Right.
it was a little bit marketed as like Web3 ish,
Okay.
so there wasn't a lot of business.
People were online.
Yeah, I mean there were business people. Don't get me wrong, but like I was like in heaven, CMO of Pepsi and CMO of Crocs, and I was like, there's like some heavy hitters speaking to us right now.
Yeah.
So it was very, very cool. I get inspired by others. I mean, that's right.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. But that was cool. I was there last week, so I'm feeling really good and high on inspiration. But I think what I'll share is a little story about my grandpa. Right, he passed at 95. 2 days after Rook opened in 2010. And so he got to see it, it was cool. He came the first day. He was one of the 7 people who showed up day one.
That's great.
You know who you are, you 7. I call you out. But he, I was in business and he loved that I was in business. And I lived in San Francisco for a couple of years when I worked for Yahoo. And he used to call me, we'd talk. He would send me old books, those old books from his shelf with like, they're almost like yellowed out.
Yes.
Like old business books from the 70s. I still have a couple, how to deal with,
Right.
difficult
Negotiation
people.
skills.
Yes. Exactly. All of that. He worked for Fort Monmouth for the government, but so he was like always into my career. And I'll never forget, I lived in San Francisco at the time and we're on the phone and he was like, very emotional guy. So he would cry at dinner when he said grace to, all the time. We're on the phone one day and he's like, you got to remember it's later than you think. And I was like, all right, Gramps, and then I talked to him again a week later, I check in every week. He's like, don't forget, it's later than you think. And it like kind of just started when I was living in San Francisco. And I was like, what the heck does he mean by that? And I wrote it down on like a little yellow Post-it note and I stuck it to my fridge. And it took a while to resonate. Like he was giving me like his version of Nike's just do it, right? Like just, and I kept that Post-it note. I wish I had it now. I don't know where, eventually off the refrigerator. It went from one refrigerator to the next place I moved. And, but I never forgot that quote. It's later than you think. And, now almost 20 years later, I'm still thinking about this quote. And I'm like, it's 20 years after he told me. Yeah, it's later than I think. It always is later than you think. So, I keep that saying, that quote close to me because it motivates me to just do it. Just get, what are you waiting for? Because every moment you wait is a moment wasted. And in my world in business, it could be opening a new store, or it could be hiring the right person, or it could be, you got to take chances. You got to take risks. You have to. It's part of life. In your world and for your viewers, I think you could wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. And then all of a sudden the interest rate is 10%. You're like, shoot, what did I just wait for? Or, the house that would have been perfect is now gone. The next house is now gone. The third house is now gone. Bump up your offer, get confident. Because the next thing you know, a few years went by. Now your kids are older. They're maybe not in the school district you wanted. They're not in the neighborhood you wanted, all because you wanted to, save $100 on your payments, and in retrospect, now you got that promotion because at work, you might be, going up ladder and you're like, why didn't I just take that house? So I would just leave you with, it is always later than you think.
I feel like we should throw like a clapping like sound effect in here.
An emoji?
Yeah, something like that was profound. That was deep. I got chills thinking about like things that I've been waiting on in life as you're talking to me, and I'm sure our audience can feel the same way. So that was absolutely fantastic. Incredibly profound, inspiring as well. And
thanks, my grandpa, not me. That was like, I'm just passing it on.
Right. Well, you're just a shepherd of wisdom, right? Yeah, that's what you are.
Hold it in and
steward
let it out.
of inspiration, which was so Thank you. I appreciate you being on the show. I'm sure our audience will appreciate this as well. You've given us some great tips. And don't wait was probably such a impactful piece of advice you could have given, if not the best one.
I hope so.
Well, I want to thank our audience for tuning in to the Advisor Advantage with James Murphy, with Holly from Rook, and we are here giving you the advantage you need for the experience you want. We'll see you on the next show. Thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah. All right. Good.